For getting these videos, you have to subscribe RC Visakhapatnam YouTube channel. Then you can access the recorded videos. We are going to upload it. You can refer this one. Please make use of the facility and follow the instructions and the guidance of the academic counselor, Dr. Anjana ji. Okay, thank you, everyone. Madam, please go ahead, madam.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Friends, can you see the screen? Can you see the slide of verbal communication? Anyone kindly respond? Can you see the
Yes,
slide of
ma'am.
verbal
Yes,
communication?
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Visible.
Okay, thank you. So yesterday we have seen what communication is, and we have started with different types of communications. We have seen what is formal communication and informal communication. We have seen what the process of communication is, and what are the different elements of communication. And then we started with the forms or the types of the communication, and we were done with interpersonal, and formal and informal communication. Today we will see, I think, did we do verbal also?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So we'll start with the verbal and non-verbal communication. So verbal communication is a type of communication where the exchange of information takes place through words and languages. So when we are using the words or the languages to communicate to each other or to exchange the information with each other, we call it as verbal communication. So verbal communication is of two types: oral and written communication. Oral communication is, um, now see, I have changed my slide. Are you able to see the slide, oral communication?
No, ma'am.
Yesterday was also the same problem. I don't know why this is, every time I have to go back and okay. So oral communication is a communication where the message is passed through spoken words. So here orally we communicate to each other by spoken words. This includes um, communication through telephones, or communication um, mm, through face-to-face communication. So when we are talking with each other through spoken words, then it is called as oral communication. This also includes communication in meetings. This includes communication in presentations. So all these kind of communication are the example of oral communication, where with the help of the words orally, the sender or the source delivers the message to the receiver. Then we have written communication. Written communication is a communication where there is an exchange of information through written or in the printed form. So this includes communication like through circular, or through emails, through letters, through reports. So all these kind of communication comes under written communication. Now each one of them, whether it is an oral communication or the written communication, each one of them have its own merits and demerits. In some situations, or in some cases, oral communication is more important or more beneficial than the written communication. But if you take in an organization, most of the communication takes place through written communication. Now, why is that so? Why do we use written communication more than the oral communication in an organization? So what happens is, if you have a written communication, you will have um, a ready reference with you for a longer time. So in case you want to refer to that information again and again, it is possible for you to refer it. Moreover, this act as a proof. It is like, it is like a legitimate proof and an evidence which can be used if it is required. And mm, in written communication, though it acts as a legitimate proof, but the problem with the written communication is that it is more time taking, and it is difficult to persuade or convince somebody through the written words, unless and until you are a poet or an author who knows how to make use of the words to persuade and to attract the readers, but otherwise it is difficult. So that is the reason in organization the written communication is used for the formal and very simple kind of communication, like raising an indent or placing an order, or if it is a the invoice. So all these things, or any sort of agreement or any sort of deal between the parties, which can be which gives a security to both the parties. So for those things, the written communication is used. When it comes to the oral communication, here it is a very fast form of communication, because when you are talking to each other, you are able to communicate with each other. So it happens very quickly and very fast. And here the discussions or the interactions are very easy when it comes to oral communication. So when there is a sort of discussion going on, where you need to have constant exchange of information between the members, it is not possible if you keep on writing and discussing. So in that means, in for that kind of communication, oral communication is the best communication. At the same time, the feedback is very fast, it is quick, it is spontaneous when it comes to the oral communication. If it comes to written communication, then the feedback takes time, and discussion is almost impossible through the written communication. And oral communication, the problem with the oral communication is that it you cannot recall whatever the discussions have been taken place, because human brain has a limitation. So you can remember, you can recollect or recall only some percentage of whatever you have heard through the oral communication, because every human brain has its own limitation. So there the problem is. So that is the reason oral communication is used when it is the communication for very small and simple information. And when it is for the routine or the regular kind of task, for which you don't need to um, have a long written format for that. So for small activities, for small routine works, oral communication is the best. But then, as I said, it depends, depending upon the situation and type of information and type of messages, that the sender will choose whether he has to choose an oral communication or a written communication. Coming to the non-verbal communication, non-verbal communication is. Are you able to see this slide? Non-verbal communication.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So then I'm not going with the presentation mode, because through presentation mode, the slide changes are not visible to you. Okay. So non-verbal communication is a type of communication which takes place other than the usage of the words or the languages. That means through any means you try to communicate which is other than the languages or the words, that is non-verbal communication. So most of the communication takes place is the non-verbal communication. So as you can see here, more than 50% of the communication is non-verbal communication. So non-verbal communication includes communication through your facial expressions, through your body language, through your sitting posture, through your eyes, expressions of your eyes, um, the way you use your you use your hands or the legs, all these conveys some messages. So we might think that because I am not talking, so I'm not conveying any messages, but then we are absolutely wrong. Even though we are not using the words to communicate, but we are not aware that our body language is constantly sending the messages to others. So the way we sit, the way we talk, I mean, sorry, the way we sit, the way we, use our hands and legs, our shoulders, whether we are shrugging or whether we are having it straight, all these sends, some sort of information. Now, that is the reason we say, when we go to an interview room, where you have a panel, when you sit on the chair, you should occupy the chair properly, because your sitting posture indicates whether the candidate is comfortable or not comfortable, whether the candidate is confident or not confident. So if you just shrug forward, so it shows very careless. And if you are just at the edge of the chair, that shows that you are lacking in confidence and you are very nervous. And if you like occupy your chair properly and sit straight, that shows that you are confident. And some people have the habit of biting nails or doing like this, so that shows that you are nervous. Some people will tap the legs or tap the uh, the pen, so that also shows that you are a bit nervous. And the way you keep your legs, um, some people will take their leg to one corner and they sit, so that shows that you are a very careless person, or you are not even bothered to listen to what is happening. So all these kind of stuff communicates, or communicates to others. They send constantly, they send the messages to others. So we should be very very careful about how we present ourselves, because constantly, unknowingly, knowingly or unknowingly, we are sending the messages to others. So these are the different types of non-verbal communication. So you have something called as um, the kinesics. So kinesics deals with the body language. Basically, it is how we use the parts of the body to communicate to others. So like the posture, as I was telling you, the way we sit, the way we stand, when we are standing, whether we are folding our hands. So this shows you are intimidating. And if the way you are standing, the posture, so that is also a form of a non-verbal communication. Gesture is like when somebody speaks very well, you clap for them. So you are like through gesture, that's a very good gesture of appreciating the people, right? So that is also a kind of gesture. Then facial expressions, yesterday I was telling you, right, the emojis that we send in our when we exchange our messages in the chats, those are nothing but the facial expressions that we are sending. Emojis are nothing but the facial expressions. You are angry, or you are sad, or you are happy, or you are like mad, you are like crazy. So all those kind of expressions on the face. So when a person is sad, if you keep two people stand in front of you, a person who is sad and a person who is happy, looking at the face, you can make out who is sad and who is happy, because the expression that person gives easily communicates your emotions, communicates your feeling. So even your eye expressions, like if you are very angry, your eyebrows will come like this, and if you are frowning, your eyebrows goes up. So even your eyebrows, your eyes expressions, everything conveys the messages. That is about the kinesics. That means how you use the body parts to convey the messages. Next is the proxemics. Proxemics talks about the space between the people who are communicating and what that implies. So study of space in communication, or study of space and its implication on communications, is called as proxemics. So generally, when two people are talking, depending upon the space that is there between two people, can convey the message how close the two people are. So first one is the intimate is uh, two people are said to be in intimate relationship when the distance between them is less than 1.5 feet. So usually this kind of relationship and communication exists between the family members, or to some friends with whom you are extremely close. Then 1.5 to 4 feet is for the personal space. That means this is for those like your friends, or even in your business organizations, with your colleagues with whom you are quite close. So you can share the communication with them. You're free with them to communicate. So that comes under the personal space. Then you have social space, which is from 4 feet to 12 feet. So that this social space is when we speak to the strangers, and when we speak to the in the organization, when we speak to our superiors or to the other colleagues with whom we are not much closer. So then that kind of communication comes under the social space. Then if the distance between the sender and receiver is more than 12 feet, then it is called as a public space. So this is like when you have the kind of announcement which is done, or a kind of the meeting or some kind of presentation is given, then this kind of public space is created. So intimate is less than 1.5 feet, then personal space is 1.5 to 4 feet, social space is 4 feet to 12 feet, and above 12 feet or beyond 12 feet, it is a public space. So, in depending upon the space distance between the two, between the sender and the receiver, we can judge, the kind of communication, we can judge the kind of relationship we have, and this kind of bubble space will determine the type of communication they will have. Next is the um, chronomics. Chronomics is the study of time and its implications on communication. That means, how does time have an impact on communication, or how will time influence communication? So what happens is, for instance, if you have to, visit your, if you have to take, you have to visit your general manager, you just cannot barge into his cabin. You need to take an appointment with him, right? That talks about his power, and that determines the kind of communication we are going to have with our boss, because he is a superior, and the communication is going to be very, very formal. Then, if it is a boss and he wants to speak to any of the employees, he will just give a call and he will ask the employee to come and meet him immediately. So he will not wait. For him, time is very, very important. He will not wait, and he expects the employee to come and meet him immediately. But if the employee has to meet the boss, then it depends upon the time availability with the boss. So that tells about the status, the power of the person. The way you use your time tells about the power and the status of a person, and that will also depict, and that will also, have an influence on the type of the communication you are going to have. So when an employee is being called by the boss speaks, and the employee has to only listen. So the boss is giving the instructions, or he is asking for some information, right? So that all these things are affected by the time. Next is the paralanguage. Okay, paralanguage is also a type of non-verbal communication. In paralanguage, this talks about not what you speak, but how you speak. So paralanguage talks about the how aspect of the language. Language is what, when we talk, when we give a message, it is what message or what information we are giving. But when it comes to paralanguage, it tells about how. So how are we delivering our messages? So it is the paralanguage that makes our information more impactful. See, when I said that through oral communication we can, convince and persuade the people, which is not possible in written communication. That is because of the paralanguage, because we there is a modulations we can do with our voice, the frequency, the rhythm, the speed, putting stress upon certain words, increasing the volume, reducing the volume. All those things are the aspects of paralanguage, and this will, make the information very, very influential and very, very impactful. Your emotions, your feelings can be easily understood the way you speak. So, how aspect the paralanguage will help you to express your feelings and your emotions. Okay, so for instance, if there is a class and there is no teacher in the class, and the children are making noise. So if the principal happens to pass by and she enters into the class, and she goes into the class and she shouts and put the stress on the word silence, and increases her volume and says silence. So what happens, the children inside the classroom, they realize, and that the voice has a lot of anger, and it talks about, he's expecting discipline from the students, and it talks about the power of the principal. So the children, will maintain the silence. But if the same principal comes and very softly says silence, children, so what happens, the children do not bother, because the word is not that that kind of, because there is no anger, there is no stress on the word, and there is not anger any much shown on that smooth way of talking. So the students realize that it is not able to have that impact on the students. So paralanguage is the how aspect of the language. Okay, next is the haptics. Haptics is the study of touch and its impact and influence on communication. So what happens, how does touch, talks about the communication? So for instance, if an employee does a very good job and he achieves his goal, so the boss, pats the shoulder of uh, the employee. So patting on the shoulder is little, it's a touch, it's an encouraging touch. It's like, congratulating you're appreciating your employee that he has achieved his goal. So that is a kind of the meaning that this kind of patting on the shoulder gives a meaning. Or if some people, they keep the hands around the shoulders, that gives, that indicates that the two people who are walking are close to each other. So when you put your arms around the shoulders, that indicates the two people are close to each other. Or the simple example is when you shake hands. So shaking hands is also, it's, even if you don't orally wish, even if you orally do not say good morning, good evening, but when you're shaking your hands, that means you are greeting each other, right? So haptics is the study of touch and how it influences the communication and how it impacts the communication. So through touch also, the information can be delivered. That is how we teach the small children. We say good touch, bad touch. See, the touch can be also good touch and bad touch, where we try to teach small children, if somebody touches you, the way they touch, you can make out, whether the touch is, a good kind of touch or a bad kind of touch. So generally, when you keep a hand around the shoulder, normally, it's, you might keep it in a, it shows, being friends. But if that, the same kind of shoulder holding and then pressing the shoulder, that shows, a wrong kind of touch. So that gives, the intention of the person is wrong. So the touch also will indicate the different types of meaning. That is about the haptics. Then you have the physical environment. The physical environment is the place where the sender or the source is sitting. That talks about his status, his power. So for instance, if you go inside the room of your boss, the general manager, the room of the general manager will have very good walls, good colors, good good furnitures, good table, good laptop. So you can see the quality of, the physical environment, which is very very good. So that talks about, that says, that the person's status, his power, his level in the organization. When you come to, the normal, the clerk or a normal employee, they have a small cubicles or they have a small normal place to sit. So that talks, when you compare these two, the comparison can give you the power and the status of the respective people in the organization. Same thing goes with the personal appearance. The appearance of the person, that also talks about the person. That is the reason we say, like you should, the you should groom yourself well, because we say that before you talk, your personality is going to talk. So that is the reason you need to groom well, you need to dress up well, you need to, wear iron dresses, so that it gives a good appearance and people think that yes, she's a good organized person. And the same thing is with the artifact, right? Artifacts are the objects that uh, uh, you know um, it has an impact on the communication. The objects, in the sense, the objects that are used by the people and what it communicates. So a simple example, when we see the celebrities, because they have enough money with them, so the kind of perfumes they use, the kind of the brand they use, whether it is the wristwatches or whether it is the automobiles they are using, the cars or the furnitures, whatever you see, the objects that they use, or the accessories they wear, the handbags they use, the laptops they carry, the shoes they wear, right? So all this will talk about the power and the level they have in the society. So that is the artifact. Okay. So these are the different types of the non-verbal communication. And that is how we say that The face is the index of a person. What does that mean? Face is the index of a person. That means when you look at the face, or in general, when you look at the person, that talks about the person, because the face itself has all sort of expressions, all sort of the you have the eyes, the expressions that communicates most of the information. So that talks about a person. And then we say the action speaks louder than the words, right? You have a saying that action speaks louder than the words. What are those actions? Those are nothing but all these non-verbal forms of communication. They are louder than the words. Sometimes the words might not give the actual meaning, but your actions, or the non-verbal means can give the more information. For instance, if I wear a a new dress and go to my college, and if I ask my colleague, how am I looking, and she's like looking at me and she's like, yeah, it is good, but the kind of expression she gives, yeah, it is good. So the expressions and the para language, the way she said, yeah, it is good, that shows that she is actually not happy with the dress, even though in words she's saying, yeah, it is good. But because of the non-verbal means of communication, I can make out that she actually did not mean that. So that is the power of non-verbal communication. So this is what I was talking about, the postures, the gestures, the facial expressions, the paralanguage, the proxemics, that is the study of space between the people. Um, okay, so we are done with the types of communication. And now let us see communication in the workplace or in an organization. So, communication or the organizational communication is the communication that takes place inside the organization to achieve the goals of both the individual and the organization. So, everyone in the organization, whenever they have the formal communication among themselves to achieve a particular task, or to achieve the departmental goal, or to achieve the organizational goals and objectives, that kind of communication that happens, whether it is communication between two people or within a group or between departments, which is to achieve a specific task and a goal, is called as an organizational communication. So here the organizational communication, because it is a formal communication, and if you can recall what I explained yesterday about the formal communication, it is it follows a prescribed path and a channel, and it has a proper structure. It has a proper structure and it has to follow a specific direction. It cannot go the way it likes, unlike the informal communication. So these are the types of business communication in an organization: internal communication and external communication. Internal communication is the communication that takes place inside the organization. That means the communication that takes place between the peers and colleagues, the communication that takes place between the superior and the subordinate, the communication that takes place between two different departments. So what, or the communication that takes place in a specific team, whatever it is inside the organization, whatever the formal communication takes place to achieve a particular task, is an internal communication. So this internal communication is can be done through notice or reports or memos or face-to-face communication, where the team members sit together and they discuss over an issue, or it can be uh, through emails between the departments, from one office to the other office. So all that communication that takes place inside the organization between the various departments, or between one office and the other office of the same organization, that is called as an internal communication. So internal communication is very much needed, because for any organization to work, whether it has to you know to perform any management function, whether it is planning or it is staffing or it is uh, uh, it is motivating, or it is directing, or it is controlling, you need to have communication. Whether it is to have the coordination between the departments, or whether it is to measure the performance appraisal of the employees, or whether it is to control the activities, or to control the activities of the indisciplined employees, or whether it is to um, submit the reports to the higher authorities. So all any sort of communication that takes place inside the organization to achieve the organizational goals will come under internal communication. Then you have the external communication. External communication is the communication that takes place between the organization and outside parties. So organization does not work in isolation. It does not work in a vacuum. It is working in the presence of other factors which is available in the available external to the organization. So these parties with which the organization has to constantly communicate to achieve its various goals is called as external communication, and these parties includes parties like customers, competitors, um, the government agencies, banks, financial institutions, buyers, suppliers, society, shareholders. All these are the external parties through which to which the organization has to constantly share the messages and exchange the messages. So every organization has to communicate with the customers, right? After all, they are existing in the market to enhance their wealth. So they have to constantly communicate with the customers. They have to make the customers aware regarding the existence of the product, regarding the upgradation of the product, regarding the launch of the new product, regarding the availability of the product, regarding the price of the product. So all the informations have to be made available to the existing customers and also to the potential customers through the promotional techniques, right? So not only that, they also expect the customers to give the feedback. They do the survey on customers to take the feedback from them to improve their offerings, right? So there also there is an exchange taking place. Again, coming to the banks, no organization can work without the help of bank, because not only they take the loan from the bank or from the financial institutions, but also when they have to make a payment or receive a payment, it is done through the banks. So banks, financial institutions, governments, because government we have to file the taxes. Then also we have to work under the rules and regulations of the government. So you cannot ignore the government. So likewise, society, nowadays society has become very very vigilant. They are not buying the products which are not environment friendly. In fact, they want organic products. They want the products which does not pollute the environment. Example, the EV vehicles are the best examples, where people are shifting from the petrol or the diesel based automobiles to the electric vehicles. So the society also the organization also needs to communicate to the society, and society again gives back to the organization. So what society expects from the organization. So all these communication that takes place between the organization and all these external parties. Then shareholders, shareholders, whatever the AGM has happened, the meeting, the minutes of the meeting has to be shared with the shareholders. So all sort of communication has to be exchanged with all these external parties. Buyers, right? The buyers, or in the sense the suppliers. The buyers are anyway the customers. The suppliers, to manufacture the goods and services, you need the raw materials or the machineries. So you have to approach the suppliers. So you have to communicate to the suppliers. So all these kind of communication that takes place with these external parties are the external communications. And external communication can be done through letters, through fax, through direct mails, or through internet, in the sense through websites, then through advertisement, through telephones. So these are the different means through which the external communication can be done. Okay, so these are the external parties, as I was telling, through which the organization has to communicate. So even the press also comes under that. Okay, this one we have covered yesterday, right? That under internal communication, you have formal communication and informal communication. So, formal communication we have seen yesterday, that you have vertical communication, then you have horizontal communication, then you have the diagonal communication, and under informal communication you have gossips, you have a single stand chain, then you have cluster, and then you have the probability communication. So this is what we have discussed yesterday, which can be seen in the form of this diagram, right? If you see here, this is a downward communication from manager to assistant manager. From assistant manager to manager, it is upward communication. So this is an example of vertical communication. Downward and upward comes under vertical communication. Then horizontal communication is between the people who are in the same level of the hierarchy. Upward and downward is between the people who fall under different levels of the hierarchy. Same level of hierarchy is horizontal communication. So these assistant manager production, assistant manager marketing, assistant manager finance, if they communicate with each other, then it is a horizontal communication. Also, the peers and the colleagues communicating with each other, if they have a formal communication taking place between the peers and colleagues, that also comes under horizontal communication because they also belong to the same level in the hierarchy. Diagonal communication is where it is between different levels of the hierarchy at the same time, among different the communication is between different departments. So this we have discussed yesterday as well. Then, in the organization, you also have something called as communication network. Now, what are these networks? The networks are the all type of patterns of the all types of patterns of the communication channels that takes place in the organization, be it an individual communication, be it a small team communication, be it a group communication, be it a departmental communication, be it an organizational communication. All sort of possible patterns or channels of networks of communication that is available in the organization will constitute the communication network in the organization. So there are different types of network, the possible network that the communication network that can take place in an organization. The first one is the chain network. In chain network, the communication takes place in a hierarchy. So this kind of communication or this kind of network is there usually in the bureaucratic organization or in the government organization where it's all through a very it's like the red tapeism where a particular chain or a particular command of hierarchy has to be followed. You cannot A cannot communicate with C. If A wants to deliver some information to C, he has to deliver it to B and B will deliver it to C. So there is this particular chain of command that has to follow. You cannot bypass any person in between. That will be taken as an indiscipline. So this kind of communication usually takes place in bureaucratic organization. Or the problem with this kind of communication is that it takes time to deliver the message from one point to the other point, and at the same time there is no motivation and satisfaction because they cannot communicate, the A cannot communicate directly with C cannot communicate directly with E. So there's a sense of demotivation, a sense of dissatisfaction among the employees who are involved in the chain network. Also, one more problem is that the distortion of the message. Distortion in the sense the message gets diluted or the actual message loses its forms. There are some additions and deletions that takes place, especially if it is an oral communication. But if it is a written communication, the distortion will not take place. Okay. So this is the major plus point and minus between oral and written. In oral communication, the distortion happens. In written communication, there is no distortion in information happens because it is in written format. It has to just pass on from one level to the other level. But the time taken to reach takes the time taken to reach is more in a chain network because it takes time. It has its own procedure which needs to be followed. Okay, next one is the wheel network. In a wheel network, you have a manager or a leader who is sitting at the center of the wheel, and this manager can communicate to all the other employees who are sitting at the rim or the edge of the wheel, the rim of the wheel. So these are the employees who are sitting at the rim of the wheels, and this is the manager or the leader. So if it is the manager or the leader who can communicate to all these employees, but these employees cannot communicate to other employees, they can communicate only to the leader. They are not allowed to communicate to the other employees who are sitting, who are available or who are available in the rim of the wheel. So this is very very demotivating for these employees, because they cannot communicate among themselves. So if any information has to pass, it has to only go to the leader, and the leader will disseminate the information to all these employees. So in in those team where the employees are unskilled and they do not have enough knowledge and information, they are dependent on the leader or the manager. So for such kind of team, this network is good. Otherwise, usually you cannot even, there is no discussion also possible, whether in chain or whether in wheel network. Discussions are not possible in this kind of network. Next is the circular. The circular network is a network where the employees sitting over here can speak to the other employees who are sitting next to them. That means if you take this employee A, he can speak to this person B who is sitting next to him, and E who is sitting next to him. So that means a person can speak to the person who is sitting left to him and right to him. But you cannot speak to the person who is sitting beyond that. So A can speak to B, A can speak to E, but it cannot communicate with C and D. A cannot exchange messages with C and D. So A can exchange messages with only B and E. Similarly, B can exchange messages with A and C. So likewise, every employee is allowed to communicate or exchange messages with the people who are sitting next to them but not beyond them. So this kind of network becomes very, very messy and very noisy if the members are more in number, because this is uncontrollable. He is speaking to these two, he is speaking to these two, so it's very unorganized. It becomes very unorganized if the number of employees or number of participants in this kind of networks increases. So though the discussions might be possible between these three people, but then it cannot be possible among these people. So here, it creates a lot of confusion, because they are speaking something, this group is speaking something. It only creates a chaos and a confusion. So next is the star network, or it is also called as a free flow network. So if you can see here, every employee can speak to every other employee sitting in any corner of the office. So A can communicate or exchange the information with B, C, D, and E. Similarly, B can also exchange the messages with A, C, D, and E. So every employee is free to exchange the messages with any other employees. So this is a highly motivating and highly satisfying kind of network, where every employee feels very happy because they are able to communicate to anyone, and there is no controlling factor over here. But again, here the discussions, okay, if there has to be a discussion among the members, then this network is very very good, because there is a free flow of communication in all the directions, in the sense with all the other employees. So all the employees are free to discuss. But then here also, in case if the number of employees increases, sometimes it might become very noisy. So there has to be a controller, who can control and who have to make sure that this does not become noisy, and every person is given a chance to express their views and discuss everything with the other employees. So these are the this is all about the communication in the organization. Then you have barriers to communication. So barriers are, if you can remember, in the first class we were talking about the noise in the communication process, right? We have physical noise, we have psychological noise, we have semantic noise. So those noise are now opened up, and there are different types of barriers which are categorized into different categories. So barriers are any kind of obstacles which obstructs the free flow of communication from sender to receiver or from the receiver to the sender. So though we say that we have this communication process, but that's a very ideal kind of communication process which does not happen, because there's a lot of barriers, there's a lot of obstacles that hinders the flow of communication, and that leads to miscommunication or misunderstandings, and sometimes it also leads to the complete communication failures. That is all because of the barriers that exist, and one has to know, if one has to improve the communication and improve the efficiency in communication, and one wants to have a successful communication, then they must understand first of all what are the barriers that obstructs the flow of communication, and how we can overcome these barriers. The first one is the semantic barriers. Semantic barriers are the barriers that deals with the languages, the words. So if you use certain jargons which others are not aware of, for instance, of course now everyone knows the term copy. Burning a CD. So there's a small story, where a new employee joins the organization, and his boss says, he gives him a CD, and he says, kindly burn this CD for me. And the employee, the new employee, he takes the CD and he goes out. So it's like, the boss is waiting and waiting, and he does not, the employee does not turn in. And then when he calls the employees, he says, "Where are you? Come fast. I need, I need that information." The employee enters the cabin of the boss, and the boss asks, "Okay, where is the CD?" He says, "You told me to burn the CD, and I have burned the CD." So what happens? Burning a CD means taking a copy of that. But this new employee who did not understand the jargon, where in the IT firms they use this jargon to burn, is to take a copy. He thought literally he has to burn the CD, and he went out and he has literally burned the CD. So what happened there? The jargon was used by the boss, and this jargon was not, um, the employee was not aware of this jargon, and he took the literal meaning of that word, and he has literally gone and burned the CD. So that is the reason, to avoid the confusion, you should know whether the person to whom you are communicating is aware of those jargons or not. So it's not possible to know, you have to every time ask. So that is the reason I should avoid using the jargons. If you are communicating, an IT is communicating to an IT person, then they can use those jargons. But using those jargons to some other departments or to the person who does not belong to that field, usually will lead to the communication failures. Also, one should use the language which other person is aware of. So if somebody comes and tries to speak in Telugu with me, I might not understand because I'm not aware of it. So he is, only trying to speak in Telugu, but because I am not able to understand, it does not reach. The information does not reach me. So that is also a semantic barrier. Sometimes, a single word has two meanings. So that can also create a confusion. For example, when we say cheap, cheap has connotative meaning. Connotative means it has indirect meanings. For example, cheap can have a direct meaning, in the sense, if I say cheap, if I say, this ring looks very cheap. So there are two meanings. One is that the price, one cheap means the price is less, the other cheap means it is of a poor quality or a low quality. So that also creates a confusion in the others. And sometimes a single word has different meanings. For example, you know uh, the file, a file is, you have a cardboard file inside which where you keep the papers. Then you can say, filing a case in a court. When you file a case, that file has a different meaning. So then some people say file the nail filing, that file is different. So single word, but it has different meanings, right? Even in English also, one single word has different meanings. And then if you take in different languages, one word might be used in different languages, The same word is used in different languages, but they have different meanings, so there also it creates a problem, and that leads to the misunderstanding. So that is the reason when we use the words, we should use it very carefully. Not only that, the grammatical mistakes should be avoided. One should try to avoid grammatical mistakes, and the punctuation sometimes completely changes the meaning of the sentence. So you have to be very careful when you are framing your sentences or your messages. So grammatical mistakes, the punctuations, all these things should be taken care of. Okay, so that is about the semantic barrier. Psychological barriers are those, which are like which includes the attitude of a person, which includes the perception. Some listeners, they will perceive only certain things and they do not want to listen to others. Then some people have, the emotional state of the person. All those things will come under the psychological barriers. The fear of the person, all those things will come under the psychological barriers. Generally we say, when a person is very sad or when a person is very happy, he should not take any decisions, because he is dominated by those emotions. So his, sense of receiving the messages and giving the messages will not be apt at a high level of emotional state. Physical barriers includes the barriers like the physical noise. Some noise is being made by somebody, so that acts as a hindrance. Or it can include the distance between the sender and the receiver. So somebody is very far away from me, he cannot listen to me. That also leads to act as a barrier. Or time can also act as a barrier to communication. For instance, if you take the time now in India, it's a daytime. If you take the time now in US, it is night time. So there's a time distance, and that is stopping us to communicate with each other. So that those are the physical barriers. Organizational barriers includes, the rigid rules and regulations in the organization. Some organizations have very rigid rules, like, we have the chain hierarchy just now we saw in the bureaucratic organizations. So there, that acts as a barrier. Some organizations, have a closed structure where they do not believe in the transparency in communication. They don't like to disclose every fact with the employees. So that also leads to the miscommunications, because people start judging themselves. When you don't get the information, you start imagining the information depending upon whatever is happening. Or when there are no regular meeting organized in the organization, the information is not disseminated. So these kind of stuffs, these kind of problems also creates, the barriers in the organization among the employees, or among the superiors and among the subordinates in the organization. Personal barriers includes the barriers like egoistic state of the person, the nature of the person. They do not want to, they're not interested to listen to the sender, to the receiver, the source. Or they have the ego problems. They do not want to listen because they think that they are the great people and they know everything. So those kind of problems also act as a barrier. Then mechanical barriers includes barriers like, so for instance, if you are talking over a telephone, so there is any issue with the line is not clear, or there is, any internet issues, so you're not able to send the messages or the mails, right? So those things will come under mechanical barriers. Okay, so these are the barriers to communication. And how can one overcome these barriers? So to overcome these barriers, one has to use simple languages, use the grammar properly, avoid using jargons. Don't judge the speaker. You should allow the speaker to complete their information. Do not, if it comes to the organization, then the organization should regularly organize the meetings to disseminate the information, should follow the transparency in communication, should allow, the regular meetings with the employees, should allow the feedback, should have an open door policy where, the employees are allowed to give the feedback or the suggestions to the management. So these kind of stuffs help to overcome the barriers in the barriers to the communication. So I guess we are done with the first unit, and a part of second unit as well, because in second unit I saw you have communication in the organization. So in tomorrow's class we will start with the listening and the reading. Okay, any doubts so far?
One dot, ma'am, please.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
How communicate top manager to the lowest rankers?
How to?
How to communicate top management to lowest rankers, like employee, staff?
You are saying how can the top management, how can top manage, you want to you are asking how can employee communicate to management, or how can management communicate to employees?
Uh, Management communicate to employee.
Management communicating to employees. So there are different ways through which management can communicate to employees, either through meetings, through presentations, or through circulars, right? Sometimes some of the organizations they keep open door policies, so what they do is okay, this becomes this is downward, this is upward, you are talking about downward communication. So downward communication is through meetings, through presentations, through circulars, through notice, through the rules and regulations, through the policies. So these are the means through which the top management communicates to the employees. And again, it varies from organization to organization. Some organizations are so rigid that they do not want to have a direct communication with the employees, so they make use of the written communication. But some management are very open, and they think that there has to be face to face communication between the management and employee to have better relations between the management and employee, and to have good harmonious relations. So then they go for face to face communications. They allow for the meetings, they have open discussions forums where the management openly discuss anything with the management. Is your doubt cleared, Mr. Gopi Raman?
जी जी मैम.
Okay, anyone, any other doubts?
Ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can you once again tell the examples of organizational barriers?
uh, which example? Like, there are so many barriers. For instance, as I told you, if it is physical barriers, okay, for instance,
Organizational barrier, ma'am.
sorry, organizational barriers. Okay, in organization, some organizations are very, very rigid. You know, they uh, they do not conduct the meetings properly. They do not disseminate the information properly. Or if I say rigid in the sense, the communication has to follow a particular direction. Like as I told you in the single strand, the communication in a single chain, it has to follow a particular hierarchy. So it has to go from A to B, B to C, C to D. So the communication flows uh, in that particular hierarchy. So if A wants to communicate to C, they cannot. A has to communicate to B, and B has to communicate to C. For example, if you go to any government organizations, they will tell you, no, you submit this form in that office, and that office will submit to that other office. That other office will give it to the other office, right? They will make you move from one person to the other person. It's all the paperwork, that is the rigidity in their functioning. So there, it becomes as a barrier, because it is taking a lot of time. Okay, the other is, there are no regular meetings. So employees are not able to get any information properly. And some places they do not expect the employees to give any feedback. So when employees are not allowed to give any suggestions or feedback, they cannot disclose what problems they are facing. So then that also becomes as a barrier, because employees not able to communicate, because they are not allowed to give any feedback. So they have a very rigid kind of structure, where the employees are not given the freedom to discuss freely with the management. So that can also act as a barrier. Some policies are very rigid, like only the whatever the management says, the employees have to follow. Employees cannot question the management. So even if they find that a particular policy is having a problem and that has to be modified, even though they put forward that the management does not bother, and they do not respond to that. So because they are very rigid, so their policies are like that, they are not supposed to take any suggestions from the employees, so that act as a barrier. It becomes like a tight container, there is no possible exchange of the information that is taking place. So that leads to the employees not getting sufficient information, that leads to the problem.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, any
Ma'am,
other doubts? Yes.
ma'am, in nonverbal communication topic, we have came across this chronomics one,
Yes.
and it was regarding the chronomic part is all about with respect to the time,
Yes.
and it was mentioned that there are two different kind of systems: monochromatic time system and polychronic time system. Coming, I have understood this polychronic time system, but what is this monochronic time system? I didn't
What does
understand, ma'am.
what does the monochromatic time system says?
It says that monochronic in which the Americans view time as a commodity and it should not be wasted or taken lightly as it equals to the loss or waste of
Yes.
money.
Yes, because for those kind of people, time is more important. For instance, if you take business people, for them time is important. So they will not, they don't want to spend more time. For them, even if the money gets wasted, it is fine. But for them, time is more important. So they want to preserve the time. So it's like, they do not want to compromise spending more time, because they are okay spending more time, more money. But for them, time is very important. So that is the reason, if you have to visit such kind of people, they will give you time, okay, I give you 2 minutes, you tell me whatever you want to discuss, and with that beyond 2 minutes they will not talk to you, because for them time is very important. Those are the monochromatic type of people.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, any other doubts? So shall we close the session for today? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So we'll meet tomorrow at the same time, 5 to 6.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sir, is there any practical or like assignments for the first semester for MBA in business logistics and supply chain, sir? Hello, sir, are you there? Sir, excuse me, sir, are you there? Sir, is there any assignment for first semester for MBA program? Hello, Sai.
Hello. Hello. Fine. Hello.
హలో
హాయ్ తెలుగువా?
బ్రో, తెలుగే బ్రో. నేను అందుకే సాయి అన్నాను.
ఆ, అదే అదే.
బ్రో, అది ఫస్ట్ సెమ్ కి అసైన్మెంట్స్ ఉన్నాయా లేవా?
ఉన్నాయి కానీ ఎప్పుడు సబ్మిట్ చేయాలి అదంతా నాకు ఐడియా లేదు. అది దానికి అడగడానికి వచ్చాను అనమాట.
ఓకే, మీదే ప్రోగ్రాము
మాది ఎంబీఏ పోయం.
అంటే?
MBA ఆపరేషన్ మేనేజ్మెంట్.
ఓకే, నాది సప్లై చైన్ మేనేజ్మెంట్, సప్లై చైన్ లాజిస్టిక్స్.
హలో,
హలో,
అనేది
నాది MBA బ్రో, సప్లై చైన్ అండ్ లాజిస్టిక్స్.
ఓకే ఓకే. ఏ ఇయర్? అదే జూలై 2024.
ఇప్పుడు డిసెంబర్లో ఫస్ట్ సెమిస్టర్ రాస్తున్నాను. మీరు కూడా అంతేనా?
సేమ్ అంతే.
ఓకే,
ఏమైనా ఐడియా ఉందా అసలు అంటే
కాకినాడ.
అసైన్మెంట్స్ గురించి? ఏంటది?
మీ స్టడీ సెంటర్స్ అక్కడ కాకినాడ?
లేదు, విశాఖపట్నం.
ఓకే, నాది రీజనల్ సెంటర్ విశాఖపట్నం, స్టడీ సెంటర్ కాకినాడ వచ్చింది.
ఓకే, నేను ప్లేస్ ఎక్కడ ఉంటుంది? ప్లేస్
నేను లోకలే, వైజాగ్.
వైజాగేనా?
ఆ,
మరి ఇదేంటి స్టడీ సెంటర్ వచ్చేసి? ఓకే, అక్కడ ఉంటున్నారా? స్టే ఏంటి?
నా బ్రాంచ్కి అక్కడ ఇచ్చారేమో బ్రో మరి. సార్ ఉన్నారు నాకు తెలిసి, మీటింగ్ ఇంకా క్లోజ్ చేయలేదు.
అదే అదే.
అడుగుదామని వెయిట్ చేస్తున్నాను.
స్టార్టింగ్ లో నేను ఇంకా లేను. ఇప్పుడు చెప్పింది ఏ టాపిక్ అంటే?
ఇప్పుడు చెప్పింది ఇంగ్లీష్ ఆర్గనైజేషనల్ బిహేవియర్ లో కూడా వస్తుంది అనమాట. సరే,
బిహేవియర్.
ఎగ్జామ్ ఫీజు కట్టేసావా?
ఎగ్జామ్ ఫీజు కట్టేసాను, అంటే లాస్ట్ డే వచ్చేస్తుంది కదా అని చెప్పి కట్టేసాను.
ఏంటి?
అదే లాస్ట్ డే 20th కదా, అసలు 15th కే ముందే కట్టేసాను.
ఓకే,
నేను ఆన్లైన్ లో చూస్తున్నాను అనమాట, ఏంటి అసలు ఏంటి అనేది.
ఎలా కట్టాలనా?
అంటే కట్టేసాను, కానీ ఎలా కట్టాలని కదా, అంటే ఎప్పుడా ఎగ్జామ్ అని, ఎలాగ రాయాలి, ఎలాగ ఏంటి అనేది.
అది ఇంకా చెప్తారు అనుకుంటా.
కదా అసైన్మెంట్స్ రాస్తున్నావా నువ్వు?
అసైన్మెంట్స్ అంటే అది ఎలా రాయాలి అసలు? అంటే నాకు అసలు ఏం తెలియట్లేదు బ్రో అది.
నాకు తెలిసినంత
మాకు
వరకు
వచ్చాయి
అయితే
books.
నేను ఏంటది?
నాకు బుక్స్ కూడా మొన్నే వచ్చాయి.
నాకు కూడా సెప్టెంబర్ లోనే వచ్చాయి,
బెటర్ ఒకసారి
కానీ వీళ్ళని
వెళ్ళి
అడుగుతుంటే ఏమొచ్చి
ఇద్దరం వెళ్ళి కలిస్తే బెటర్ ఏమో కదా
వీళ్ళని
అక్కడ
అడిగాను ఆల్రెడీ.
సెంటర్కి వెళ్ళి
అడిగాను
కలిసి.
ఆల్రెడీ.
ఆహా,
నీది అంటే ఆ, నువ్వు ఎప్పుడైనా వెళ్ళావా లేదా ఇక్కడ
లేదు బ్రో,
విశాఖ
వెళ్ళలేదు
జంక్షన్ దగ్గర? వెళ్ళాను.
వెళ్ళలేదు. హలో,
ఏంటది?
వెళ్ళలేదు బ్రో.
చెప్పు.
బ్రో ఒకటి చేయి, నేను నా ఫోన్ నెంబర్ ఇస్తా, ఫోన్ చేయి.
ఓకే ఓకే.
73306.
ఒకసారి 73306.
73306
ఓకే.
70072.
70072.
ఆ,
73306 70072.
73306 722. 70072.
ఓకే ఓకే.
చేయండి
నేమ్
ఒకసారి.
ఏంటిది?
సూర్య బ్రో, సూర్య గణేష్, సాయి సూర్య గణేష్.
గణేష్. ఓకే.
సార్ ఫోన్ చేయండి, మిస్ కాల్ ఇవ్వండి ఒకసారి.
సరే.
హలో సార్. హలో, సుప్రీత బ్రో.